Prologue. Evnis, fearful yet determined, ventures into the dark wood at night to meet Reen, Queen of Cambrin. Betraying his king, he seeks power to escape his brother's shadow and avoid a marriage arranged for him. Reen promises him control of Ardan in exchange for his allegiance, linking his fate to the God War and Asroth. She orchestrates a ritual where the blood of a captive is used to summon Asroth's spirit. Evnis, sealing his pact, sacrifices his own blood to complete the ritual, gaining the power he sought but at a terrible cost. The deal is sealed. In Chapter 1, Corban, a young boy in Dunkereg, attends a ceremony where Marek and Rhaegar bind their hands in marriage. Corban, uninterested in the formalities, is distracted by a spider and later a lively festival. After some playful teasing from his friend Daith, Corban's mother gives him a silver coin for the festival. They explore the crowded meadow, watching contests and admiring goods in a trader's tent. Corban buys a few items, including a practice sword. At the sword crossing contest, Tull, the king's champion, easily defeats his opponent, leading Corban and Dath to imitate the fight. In Chapter 2, Varatus, an accomplished rider, endures the strain of a long journey with his brother Kralis and a prisoner Dynan, whom they escort to King Aquilus' court. The prisoner, a Vinthalan raider, claims to have vital information about a secret meeting involving the Vinthalan king, Lycos, and a Tenebral baron. King Aquilus is skeptical, but intrigued by the details. Meanwhile, Varatus is formally welcomed into the service of Nather, the Prince of Tenebral, who is eager to use him in his warband. Varatus is uncertain, but accepts, beginning a new chapter in his life. In Chapter 3, Corban and his friend Dath are harassed by Rafe and his group led by Vaughn in the meadow. After a tense confrontation, Rafe bullies Corban, physically assaulting him and taunting him for not fighting back. Corban struggles with fear and shame, feeling powerless as Rafe and his companions mock him. Later, the stablemaster Gar finds Corban and offers to teach him how to control his emotions and fears. Corban reluctantly agrees, understanding that he needs to overcome his cowardice. After a brief visit to Dylan's family farm, Corban continues his journey, reflecting on his struggles. In Chapter 4, Evnis reflects on his past oath to Asroth and his rise to power as a counselor to King Brennan of Arden. He waits with his huntsman, Helfach, in the Bogland Forest for a mysterious figure who delivers a message. The parchment directs Evnis to a target, a family living near Dunkereg, and advises him to stir Brennan into action quickly. Evnis also worries about his wife Fane's illness, as the letter hints at a dangerous solution involving ancient earth power and a cauldron. As he heads back to Dunkereg, he contemplates the deep treason tied to his oath. In Chapter 5, Corban ventures into the Bagland Forest, reflecting on his father's tales of lawless men from the Darkwood. Reaching an oath stone, Corban touches it, causing a vision of a dark, ominous cauldron and a strange figure. He then hears howling in the distance and follows it, finding a wolven trapped in a bog. After rescuing the creature, Corban is confronted by the wolven's pack. As he tries to find his way out of the forest, he becomes lost. Eventually, he hears Gar calling his name and reunites with him, realizing his sister had sent Gar to find him. In Chapter 6, Varatus, part of Nather's warband, reflects on his brother Kralis and his chainmail shirt, which he treasures despite rarely wearing it. The group, journeying south of Geraldine, encounters the Vinthalan counselor, who reveals Lycos' plan to meet with Nather. He explains that Aquilus' soldiers are occupied, and Nather is the only trustworthy candidate for the mission. The counselor proposes an alliance with Tenebral, warning of changing times. Tensions rise as a giant Alcyon appears, and the counselor creates a wall of fire between Nather and his companions. Varatus prepares to charge through the flames. In Chapter 7, Cywin helps Gar with horse trading at the spring fair, but is distracted by concerns about her brother, Corban, and Gar's absence. After handling a horse with a lamed hoof, Cywin has a confrontation with Rafe, attacking him in anger over a previous incident with Corban. The fight is interrupted by Adana, who diffuses the situation. Cywin later learns Corban has been to the Bogland, and they discuss Rafe. Gar returns with Corban, who is injured. The group is joined by two riders who seek the king, signaling a new development. Gar warns Cywin to give Corban space to heal. In Chapter 8, Castell, traveling with a merchant train, reflects on his past and the tension in his life. He is glad to be away from Mickle, where his cousin Jael taunts him, and his uncle Romar's anger over the theft of a legendary relic, the Starstone Axe. As they journey, Castell struggles with self-pity and anger, particularly at the memory of his family's slaughter by the Hunan giants. Tensions arise when he misunderstands a conversation with Aguila, but after a night of introspection, Castell apologizes, feeling a glimmer of hope for change. In Chapter 9, Corban attends a hand-binding ceremony where Fionn and Marach vow to remain bound together. He reflects on his life and the tension between his family and Dath's father. During the feast, Corban talks with Dath and Dylan, but tensions rise when Dath reacts to Brina, a healer with a bad reputation. After an awkward encounter with Pendathrin, Corban hears stories about the past and the origins of the land's giants. As night falls, a fire in Daryl's stockade is spotted, and Gar urgently calls for help, signaling impending danger. In Chapter 10, Castell and Macwin travel toward Hallstatt with Aguila and others. After an encounter with a lone messenger from Tenebril, they approach the mountain pass near Forn Forest. Suddenly they are ambushed by the Hunin, giant warriors who attack the caravan. Aguila is killed, and Castell and Macin fight for their lives. Macin is thrown from his horse, but Castell manages to kill a giant. The two are pursued by the Hunin, barely escaping by riding through the night. As the giants close in, Castell refuses to abandon Macin. Just as they are about to be overwhelmed, Romar, Castell's uncle, arrives with reinforcements, saving them. In Chapter 11, Corban rides with Gar towards Daryl's burning hold. Upon arriving, they discover the aftermath of an attack. Daryl and his family have been slain, and the feast hall is charred. Corban finds the bodies of Daryl's family among the ruins, including his friend Dylan. Brennan, the king, vows justice, suspecting lawless men are responsible. The next day, Corban struggles with grief, but is sent to help with rebuilding efforts. As he works, he learns more about the attack, including a necklace linked to Dylan's sister. Corban continues to mourn as the hunt for the killers intensifies. In Chapter 12, Veratus fights a giant to protect Nether but is injured and knocked unconscious. After recovering, he learns the confrontation with the giant was a demonstration of power, meant to show Nather's vulnerability. Later, Veratus hears Nather has secured a treaty with the Vinthalan, though mistrust remains. Nather and his warband return to Geralin, where tensions about the treaty grow. King Aquilus expresses doubts, fearing the Vinthalan's intentions, and sends an escort to ensure their messenger arrives safely. As Veratus watches, a new threat emerges, Tarbesh's warriors signaling the start of potential conflict. In Chapter 13, Corban and Cywin discuss a mysterious visitor marked by a white eagle on his shield. Cywin is summoned by Gar, the stablemaster, and they meet with him as he tends to a colt. Gar offers to train Corban, and despite his grief over Dylan's death, Corban agrees. At a feast, Brennan announces he must attend a king's council in Tenebril, leaving Alona in charge. He vows to seek justice for Daryl's family. That night, Corban overhears Gar and his mother discussing something cryptic, increasing his curiosity about what's coming next. In Chapter 14, Evnis stands by his wife Fane's bedside, overwhelmed by his fear of losing her. He recalls the long search for the giant's book, which is said to prolong her life. After an urgent search beneath Dunkereg, Evnis and his men discover a tomb containing the book and a powerful pulsing stone. During their retreat, they encounter a white worm, which they defeat after a fierce battle. Evnis presents the worm's head to King Brennan, who questions the timing of such a beast's reappearance. Evnis also requests permission to take Fane to Baden for healing, but is denied due to Brennan's need for his counsel. In Chapter 15, Corban experiences a strange dream, encountering a mysterious man who urges him to find a cauldron to avert an impending war, the God War. The man hints at Corban's role in the conflict. Corban wakes, troubled, and trains with Gar, focusing on body control to manage fear and emotions. Later, Corban watches King Brennan depart with warriors, including Tull and Pendathrin. Adana confides in Corban about her unwanted betrothal to Vaughn, son of Evnis. Tensions rise between Evnis and Alona. Marach returns from the forest with news of a corpse, prompting preparations to patrol the western border. In Chapter 16, Camlin leads a small crew through the dense, perilous Baglin forest, trying to escape a warband led by Pendathrin. Despite their efforts, they are in a dire situation, low on food and morale, with tensions rising among the group. Camlin reflects on past failures, particularly the killing of women and children during a raid which has haunted him. After a brief rest, the crew is ambushed, and a chaotic battle ensues. Camlin and Goran try to escape, but as they near safety, Goran is killed and Camlin is wounded, collapsing as his vision fades. In Chapter 17, Corban continues his training with Gar, focusing on improving his physical strength and swordsmanship. After struggling in a sparring match with Gar, Corban begins to learn the sword dance, realizing that each position corresponds to a sword technique. Later, Corban's father Thanon takes him to see a new foal from Gar's stallion, a skewbald colt. On their way, they spot a warband led by Pendathrin, accompanied by Marek, Halion, and Connell. Corban notices a covered wain with a body inside, its arm exposed, revealing the grim fate of its occupant. In Chapter 18, Varatus observes various warriors arriving for High King Aquilas' council, including men from distant lands. He watches a sparring match and discusses tactics with his friend Rauka. The council begins with the arrival of the final king, and discussions turn to ominous signs of war, including giants, dregs, and mysterious creatures. Aquilas reveals that the god war, led by the dark god Azeroth, is approaching. The ancient book discovered by Michael predicts the coming of the Black Sun, a harbinger of destruction. Despite skepticism, Aquilas urges the kings to unite in defense against the coming threat. In Chapter 19, Cywin and her brother Corban overhear a conversation about a wounded outlaw, the last survivor from the Baglin forest. Princess Adonis secretly takes them into the fortress, where they listen in on discussions about the outlaw's fate and a possible connection to the brigands. Afterward, they go to see Corban's new colt, encountering Dath, who reveals he was beaten by his father. Rafe and Crane taunt them, with Rafe demanding Corban steal from the healer's cottage to earn back a stolen sword. Despite the danger, Corban agrees to the challenge, determined to prove his bravery. In Chapter 20, Varatus pursues Prince Nather after a heated argument with his father. The prince expresses disillusionment with his father's alliance and trust in Counselor Michael. They encounter a massive swarm of giant ants, which Varatus finds unsettling. After rescuing a boy attacked by the ants, they meet two warriors, Maquin and Castel. Nather continues to charm other rulers, including King Brennan, Rin, and Owen, discussing the political alliances and challenges ahead. Rin is skeptical about the alliance, citing doubts about Michael's motives and the potential for war. Nather resolves to play the political game, aiming for future power. In Chapter 21, Corban sneaks into Brina's house to complete a dare, but is caught. After explaining, Brina assigns him chores as punishment. The next day, Corban returns a stolen comb and gets into a fight with Rafe, gaining satisfaction when he knocks Rafe down. Thanon reprimands Corban for lying about his injuries, emphasizing truth and courage, then takes him to Evnis's hold. Thanon confronts Helfach about Rafe's behavior, leading to a physical confrontation. Corban assists Brina with plants, learning their uses. Brina puts him to work sweeping, and they agree he'll return every 7th night for more chores and lessons. In Chapter 22, Castel reflects on his strained relationship with his cousin Jael while preparing to leave Geraldine. He and his companion McQuinn discuss their future options, with Castel conflicted between staying with Jael or joining the Gudrai. Varatus, Nather's ally, shares insights into the political situation and their ongoing struggle for support. Tensions flare when Jael's men attack Castel and McQuinn, but Varatus intervenes, diffusing the situation. Romar confronts Jael and Castel, forcing them to reconcile. Romar emphasizes the importance of unity as they prepare for their journey home, with Jael ominously hinting that their conflict is far from over. In Chapter 23, Corban confesses to his mother Gwyneth that he lied about his injuries, admitting he was fighting Rafe rather than falling on rocks. He also reveals that he's been secretly training with Gar. Gwyneth expresses pride and tenderness toward him. Meanwhile, Corban's warrior training begins at the Rowan Field, where he faces a series of challenges. Tarbin, the Overseer, tests his sword skills and introduces him to Halion, a newcomer who will continue his training. Tensions rise when Rafe confronts Corban in the field, but Halion intervenes. Corban's training progresses, and he learns of a hunt and a death. In Chapter 24, Varatus returns home with Nather, the Prince of Tenebril. Varatus feels pride in his achievements, having become Nather's first sword and leader of his warband. He recalls memories of his family, especially his father, Lamar, whom he longs to impress. After arriving, Varatus and Nather meet Lamar and his son Ector. Varatus is greeted warmly by his brothers, especially Kralis. Varatus learns that his father has been proud of him, despite the cold distance between them. Varatus reflects on his past and his relationship with his father, feeling both honored and frustrated. In Chapter 25, Evnis grieves as the final stone is placed on Fane's cairn. Fane's brief recovery, aided by a book, faded, leaving her a shell before her death. His son, Von, stands beside him, but Evnus struggles with his own grief, unable to offer comfort. Surrounded by his warriors, he hears the lament for Fane, but is consumed by thoughts of the book, which hints at power. His hatred grows, and he vows vengeance on King Brennan, promising to destroy him. In Chapter 26, Corban participates in a hunt in the Baglan Forest, tasked with beating the game into the hunter's path. During the hunt, he and Farrell encounter a pack of wolven, with one attacking Corban. The hunt arrives just in time to save them, and in the ensuing battle, Von, Evnus' son, is killed. Afterward, Corban finds a surviving wolven cub and defies Evnus' order to kill it. Evnus threatens him, but Corban invokes the king's justice, claiming the right to protect the cub. Pendathran reluctantly agrees, though he warns Corban of the consequences. In Chapter 27, Castel and King Romar travel toward Helveth's border, discussing fate and the war with the Hunan. Romar reveals plans to strike against the giants and mentions involving Aquilus in the battle. Later, Castel's group is ambushed by unknown attackers, but they are saved by the Sirach, a fierce group of warriors. Romar thanks them, and the attackers' bodies are examined, revealing gold coins with the crest of Isiltir. Makin suspects the attackers were hired, and Castel begins to suspect Jael's involvement. The chapter ends with Castel contemplating the implications of these discoveries. In Chapter 28, Corban is traveling with a group of boys in a wain holding a bundle of fur that sparks curiosity. Farrell asks Corban about the king's justice, a rare ancient law that allows a grievance to be judged only by the king. Corban explains that Brina, a healer, told him about it. Corban reflects on recent events, including the wounded from the Glade and Von's collapse. As they approach the fortress of Dunkereg, Corban acknowledges that the cub's fate will be decided by Queen Alona. A storm is approaching as dark clouds and salty winds fill the air. In Chapter 29, Cywin is anxious about the mysterious return of riders, including her father and brother. When she sees Corban, he is carrying a wolven cub he rescued from the Baglan. Cywin questions him, and Corban reveals he defied orders to protect the cub. They are summoned by Queen Alona, who hears the accounts of the hunt and Corban's actions. Despite Evnus' objections, Alona grants Corban mercy, allowing him to raise the cub with strict terms. Corban thanks the queen, and the cub, named Storm, begins to bond with Thanan's hound, Budai. Corban's decision to protect the cub stands, with consequences yet to come. In Chapter 30, Nether reports on the council and its discussions about a potential alliance. He speaks of the mysterious Maekal and his writings, which suggest a coming god war. Lamar, Kralis, and Ektor listen intently, questioning Nether on details of the alliance and Michael's involvement. Tensions rise between Varatus and his father, Lamar, over a seating tradition, leading to a confrontation that results in Varatus defending Nether. As Varatus swears an oath of loyalty to Nether, the two head out to meet Kalidas and Lycos in the ruins of Balara, where Lycos pledges his allegiance, acknowledging Nether's destiny to unite the Banished Lands. In Chapter 31, Corban collects herbs for Brina, who is preparing a poultice for Von's recovery. Tensions rise as Corban faces Glynn, Evnus' guard, but Brina intervenes, revealing Corban's apprenticeship. Brina explains to Corban that before the scourging, all creatures were elementals, capable of commanding the elements and communicating with animals, but the world has since changed. Later, Corban and Cywin search for eggs at the cliffs, but Storm goes missing and leads them into a cave. There, Corban and Cywin discover a magical glamour, revealing a hidden chamber and hinting at ancient, giant magic. In Chapter 32, Camlin, recovering from his wound, reflects on his past and his looming fate. He is visited by Brennan, the king, who informs him of his upcoming trial and execution. Camlin admits that Braith is his lord, but refuses to betray him. Brennan presses him for more details, but Camlin remains evasive. Later, while on a walk outside, Camlin is rescued by Braith and his group after a failed assassination attempt. As they prepare to leave, Camlin insists on sparing the lives of two youths who witnessed the encounter, showing a surprising act of mercy despite the danger. In Chapter 33, Varatus and Nether examine a prized white stallion gifted by Jael of Isiltir, admired by Valine the stablemaster for its spirit. Maekal, an enigmatic figure, informs Nether that his father, King Aquilus, seeks him. In the king's chambers, Aquilus discusses the state of their alliances and the need for military preparation. Peritus reports the loyalty of regional barons, while Nethere shares that Tenebril stands united. Aquilus plans to send aid to neighboring kingdoms, but tensions arise when he questions Nethere about his involvement with the Vinthalan. The chapter ends with Aquilus asserting his authority over Nathere's loyalty. In chapter 34, Corban struggles with guilt over letting the brigands go, unsure if he made the right decision. He trains with Gar, who encourages him to focus despite his distractions. Afterward, Corban has a tense breakfast with his family, all worried about the escaped brigand and Marik's fate. Thanon insists Corban take Budai with him to visit Brina, fearing the brigands are still nearby. At Brina's cottage, Corban is met by the healer and the lore master, Heb. While sweeping, Corban faces Vaughn's anger over Storm's presence. The chapter ends with news that Marik has returned with the search party. In chapter 35, Varatus and Nathere's warband sail toward Tarbish, crossing the Tethys Sea. After weeks at sea, Varatus reflects on their journey and Nathere's leadership. They discuss their warband's new combat strategies, which blend shield walls and cavalry, as well as Nathere's plans involving the Vinthalan. Nethere shares his intentions to find Telesur, a hidden city of shadow warriors with help from Lycos and Kalidas. Upon reaching the coast of Tarbesh, Nethere prepares for a mission to aid King Rahim against the Shechem giants who are mounted on dregs. Varatus feels a mix of excitement and unease. In chapter 36, Corban returns to Dun-Correg, anxious about the consequences of letting the brigands escape. He finds Marik alive, recovering from injuries, and learns that his involvement will remain a secret known only to Brennan and Marik's uncle. The two discuss their past actions, with Corban expressing concern over others finding out. Corban later brings Storm to the Rowan Field despite opposition from some warriors. Tull, the king's champion, intervenes, upholding the queen's judgment that Corban can keep Storm. The chapter ends with Corban training with Halion, while Storm proves protective and intelligent. In chapter 37, Varatus and Nethere scout ahead of their warband near the Retta River, preparing for a confrontation with the Shechem. Kalidas and his giant companion Alcyon offer their skills to locate the Shechem using sorcery. The warband moves quickly to intercept the giants, with Varatus and his men positioned on a ridge to face the Shechem's advance. As the battle begins, Varatus leads a charge, using ranged weapons to weaken the giants and their dregs. Despite a powerful counterattack from the Shechem, Nethere's tactical plan and the warband's resilience lead to a hard-won victory. In chapter 38, Cywin and Corban practice combat with wooden sticks in the garden, but Cywin struggles to land a hit. Despite growing frustration, she notices Corban's physical and emotional changes, which make her realize he's maturing. Later, Corban speaks with his father Thanon about his experience in the Rowan Field, and why he was allowed to go despite previous restrictions. Cywin then learns from Adana that her mother, Gwyneth, was seen at the keep with the king and queen, raising Cywin's curiosity. The group, including Adana and Ronan, discusses Corban's training, Dath's first day in the field, and plans involving a gathering on Midwinter's Day. In chapter 39, Kalidas leads Nethere, Varatus, and Alcyon through a mountain range toward Telesur. Kalidas reveals they are near the Jahar fortress, hidden by powerful glamour. As they approach, Varatus reflects on their journey and expresses gratitude to Alcyon for saving his life. The group discusses dregs and the prophecy surrounding Nethere, who is believed to be the Seren Disclair. Upon reaching Telesur, they are greeted by warriors including Akar who escort them to Lord Sumer. Sumer is wary but invites them to stay, acknowledging Nathere's claim as the Seren Disclair, setting the stage for their confrontation. In chapter 40, Castell reflects on the tensions since his return to Mickle, where he feels out of place and distrustful of Jael. Makeen warns him of Jael's growing power and manipulations, urging Castell to join the Gudrai. Castell shares his uncle Romar's plans for a campaign against the Hunan, revealing his inner conflict. Castell confronts Jael, but their conversation escalates into a violent confrontation. Afterward, Castell decides to leave for the Gudrai, informing Makin, who agrees to join him. Castell faces disappointment from Romar, but leaves with his blessing to seek a new path. In chapter 41, Corban, waiting for Cywin in the rain, is reminded of recent events, including a prophecy and an upcoming gathering of kings. During a horse training session, Cywin encourages Corban, who struggles with his colt's haltering. As they finish, Three riders led by Vaughn approach, and tension rises as Vaughn and his companions, Helfach and Rafe, confront Corban. The situation escalates when Helfach orders his hound to attack Corban. The colt, unexpectedly, charges in and kills the hound, saving Corban. Afterward, Vaughn apologizes, and Corban names his colt Shield in gratitude. In Chapter 42, Varatus and his warband return to Geralyn, where they receive a warm welcome from the King and Queen. Nethair is praised for his leadership in battle, and he shares a drake's tooth as a token of his campaign. Despite the celebrations, tension grows between Nathair and Peritus, who doubted Nathair's methods. Varatus reflects on his victory over Armatus, the weapons master, but feels uncomfortable with the manipulation of the match. Meanwhile, Nethair is troubled by the upcoming prophecy and the potential arrival of Mandros, whose loyalty to Azeroth worries both Varatus and Nathair. In Chapter 43, Corban and the group travel towards Badun, passing through harsh weather. They are nearing their destination to witness the prophecy Adana spoke of and discuss the clearing of the Darkwood. Along the way, they encounter strange riders, including a pale warrior and a red-haired woman. Upon arriving at Badun, Corban finds the place crowded, with many people, including his family, and the mysterious figures who asked King Brennan for sanctuary. As they wait for Rin and King Ereman to arrive, Corban learns more about the prophecy concerning Elian and Asroth. Queen Rin eventually appears with her entourage, while the warriors of Domhain, led by Wrath, also arrive. In Chapter 44, Evnus reflects on his rise to power, his resentment toward his brother Gethin, and his secret allegiance. He is obsessed with a powerful necklace he believes to be one of the 7 treasures, though he is unsure how to wield its power. Evnus feels the weight of past loss, particularly the death of Fane, and struggles with unsettling dreams. He observes Hallion and Connell, noting Connell's pride as a potential weakness. Evnus plans to send word to Queen Rin about Brennan's latest actions, anticipating her interest in 2 new figures who joined his party. In Chapter 45, Corban and his group arrive at the feast hall in Badun, where tensions quickly escalate. Lord Gethin announces the betrothal of his daughter Kyla to Uthin, causing discontent. Rin confronts King Brennan, demanding the return of 2 individuals under his protection. When Brennan refuses, Rin challenges him, invoking the Court of Swords. Tull faces off with Morkant in a fierce duel, with both warriors enduring serious wounds. Despite Morkant's aggressive attacks, Tull triumphs, leaving Morkant alive but wounded. Rin, angry at the outcome, storms off, leaving the feast to unravel. In Chapter 46, Varatus feels anxious as Midwinter's Day arrives, reflecting on Fidel's warning and the possible consequences. Nethair and Varatus meet with Aquilus, Fidele, and other figures, including King Mandros, who accuses Aquilus of releasing the Vinthalan. Varatus notices Maikal's strange absence and sudden return. As the group assembles on the battlements to witness the foretold omen, the sun begins to darken, a black smudge spreading across its surface. The crowd reacts in shock, and Varatus notices Maikal staggering before Nethair suddenly collapses, leaving Varatus worried and unsure of what will happen next. In Chapter 47, Corban, among a crowd, witnesses a strange phenomenon as the sun darkens, causing him to faint. He experiences a vision in the other world, where a man demands his help, threatening him with dark creatures if he refuses. Corban rejects the offer, and soon the Ben Elam appear, fighting the dark creatures and lifting Corban into the sky. He wakes up in a house, cared for by Brina and surrounded by his friends. He learns that he fainted due to the shock, but remains puzzled by his strange experience. Gar informs them that King Brennan has finished his council and is leaving. In Chapter 48, Nethair recovers from his fainting spell, reflecting on the darkening sky and the prophecy's fulfillment. He decides it's time to confront his father, King Aquilus, about his identity and his role in the war. Nethair reveals his actions in Tarbesh, including his controversial use of the Vinthalan, which strains his relationship with Aquilus. Tensions rise as Aquilus questions Nethair's trustworthiness, especially after learning of his dealings with Kalidas. Meanwhile, Varatus is sent to fetch Mandros, who arrives visibly shaken. Later, Varatus discovers Nethair wounded by a knife, and Aquilus is found dead. In Chapter 49, Corban discusses Brina's cryptic statement about circles within circles, and learns about Gethin's ambitions with Narvan and Uthin's future as king. They discuss the selfish nature of people and human greed. On the journey home to Duncareg, Corban reflects on his experiences at Badun. Back at Duncareg, Corban continues his training, focusing on shield work with Halion, who teaches him the importance of deception in combat. Later, Corban stands up to Rafe, who bullies Farrell, leading to an uncomfortable confrontation. Corban then notices Gar with a mysterious man named Michael. In Chapter 50, Varatus watches a fleet land on the southern coast of Carnotton, preparing for the pursuit of Mandros. Paradis leads the campaign with Varatus' warband as the vanguard. They plan to ambush Mandros at the river ford near Dunbugle, aiming to draw him out into battle. Varatus leads his men across the river, anticipating an ambush, but his shield wall holds firm against Mandros' charge. The battle progresses with Varatus pushing forward until Mandros himself appears, rallying his forces. Varatus is wounded, but continues to advance, closing in on his target as reinforcements led by Gundul arrive. In Chapter 51, Corban meets Michael, a tall, dark-haired man with an impressive stallion. As Corban approaches, he feels an odd familiarity with Michael, but is unsure why. Michael and Corban share an intense, silent moment before Michael greets him, noting Corban's unusual companion, Storm the Wolven. Storm inspects Michael cautiously, but does not react aggressively. Michael mentions his long ride and agrees to stable his horse. Gar suggests Corban leave for Brina's before he ends up working at the stable. Despite the conversation, Corban is left with a lingering, uneasy feeling about Michael. In Chapter 52, Cywin completes a long day of work and heads to the paddocks, but remembers she needs to harvest vegetables. Upon returning home, she overhears a tense conversation between her mother Gar, Thanon, and Michael. Michael informs them that King Aquilus is dead, likely murdered by Mandros of Carnotton with Azeroth's involvement suspected. Michael discusses Ban's future, confirming he must eventually go to Drasil, but not alone. He assures Thanon and Gwyneth that Ban is safe for now. Michael warns them to trust no one except King Brennan, then leaves, his words weighing heavily on Cewin. In Chapter 53, Corban, walking back from Brina's, encounters Ventos, a trader he met at the spring fair. After a brief, cautious interaction, Corban's Wolven, Storm, is kept at a distance to avoid scaring Ventos' horses. Ventos reveals that rumors of Corban and his Wolven have spread since Dun Cadlas. As they talk, Ventos introduces his hawk, Kartala, which he won from the Sirak. Corban then watches Michael ride past on a dapple-gray stallion, his intense gaze making Corban uneasy. Michael leaves after a tense moment, his eyes lingering on Corban and Ventos. In Chapter 54, Ventos wakes before dawn in Torrhen's roundhouse, careful not to disturb the others. He quietly exits and walks through the village to his wain, where his hound, Talar, greets him. Ventos retrieves a small chest and writes a message on parchment, sealing it before attaching it to his hawk, Kartala. He sends the bird off with a quiet command, watching as it disappears into the mist, carrying the important message. In Chapter 55, Varatus and his allies defeat Mandros' forces with unexpected help from Gundul. Mandros flees, but Varatus tracks him down and kills him after a tense confrontation. The group heads toward Tarba, where they face Bello and his men. Gundul, now king, claims peace with Tenebril, but Bello warns that some may oppose Mandros' slayer. Varatus, still uneasy, receives assurance of safe passage to the mountains. The group meets Kralis, who brings Tenebril's warband. Varatus presents Mandros' severed head to Nathair, who is avenged. Alcyon arrives, offering a drake's egg as a gift. In Chapter 56, Corban observes Dath and Cywin sparring in the garden. Dath, embarrassed by his swordsmanship, has been training with Corban after Pendathrin's warband left for the Darkwood. Corban reflects on Cywin's quick progress as a swordswoman. Meanwhile, Rafe undergoes his warrior tests, successfully completing them with Tull's guidance and receiving his sword from his father, Helfach. After the ceremony, Corban and Dath discuss Rafe's upcoming long night, the final trial for becoming a warrior. Later, Corban shares a quiet moment with his mother, who is emotionally reflecting on the passage of time. In Chapter 57, Nathair successfully bonds with a newly hatched drake. As it eats and settles, Nathair discusses plans for war with his inner circle, including Varatus, Paradis, Kalidas, and Lycos. He decides to train his warriors in the shield wall technique to prevent unnecessary losses, using Varatus to select leaders for this task. Nathair also reveals the importance of a cauldron, believed to be a weapon, and sends scouts for it. Meanwhile, a mysterious host, identified as the Jahar, approaches the fortress, signaling a new development in Nathair's campaign. In Chapter 58, Corban rides Shield for the first time, gaining confidence in the cult. As he rides, he sees Pendathrin's warband return from the Darkwood significantly diminished. Later, Corban learns from Ronan about the battle with Braith and the Brigands, where many died. Braith survived, but the Brigands' power was broken. As Corban walks with Bethan, they overhear a violent confrontation between Rafe, Crane, and Farrell. Corban intervenes, attacking Rafe and Crane, but Rafe retaliates, nearly killing Corban. Storm attacks Rafe in defense, leaving him gravely injured. Corban flees with Storm, fearing the consequences. In Chapter 59, Castell and his band of warriors, led by Orgel, ride guard for a merchant barge on the Rhenus River. As they travel, they encounter a sudden attack from worms in the river and a group of giants from the forest. A fierce battle ensues, with the warriors outnumbered. McQueen and Orgel fight valiantly, but the giants overwhelm them. Castell and McQueen escape, riding towards Bricken for safety. Eventually, reinforcements led by Vandil arrive, and the giants are defeated. The Gadrai capture one giant alive, who reveals the creatures seek iron for the God War. In Chapter 60, Camlin and Braith, along with their dwindling crew, continue their journey through the Darkwood. They discuss their struggles, including the losses from recent battles. Braith reveals their plan to head for a village in the hills, seeking warmth and rest. After crossing a river, they reach the village, where the group feels safer. Camlin questions Braith about their future plans, and Braith responds that vengeance is now their driving force. As Braith prepares to leave for a few days, Camlin assumes leadership. When Braith returns with a group of Grim recruits, he hints that their path forward will be defined by vengeance. In Chapter 61, Corban struggles with the aftermath of leaving Storm in the Bugloon. He has a tense moment of self-doubt, realizing he can't run away with her, fearing for her safety. After a painful goodbye, he returns to Duncareg, where King Brennan and his court investigate the events with Rafe and Storm. Corban's account is supported by Bethan and Farrell, while Crane and others present a different story. Brennan ultimately decides to allow Storm to remain in the Baglan, but warns Corban to stay away. Corban reflects on his loss as he travels with Brennan's party, and Brina hints at the presence of a wolven tracking them. In Chapter 62, Corban and his group approach Uthenden, with Corban feeling anxious about Storm's presence. Brina reassures him by sending Craft the Crow to check the forest. They arrive in Uthenden, where King Brennan camps in a dell outside the walls. That night, Corban sits with his family and friends around a campfire, including Farrell, who thanks Corban for saving him. Heb the Lore Master joins them, sharing his disdain for the political maneuvering of Brennan's followers. Corban and his father discuss the sword Corban will soon receive for his name day, bringing Corban excitement. In Chapter 63, Cywin joins Princess Adana and others for a ride through the Darkwood. During the ride, Cywin reflects on her feelings for Ronan, who has expressed interest in courting her. The group is informed that King Brennan and his father cannot join them, but they proceed with their guide. Vaughn reveals to Cywin and Adana that he has feelings for someone else, not Adana. Kiwin also discusses Corban with Queen Alona, noting his emotional changes since the loss of Storm and his growth as a leader. The chapter ends as an arrow strikes during their rest in a glade. In Chapter 64, Corban, determined to find Storm, crosses the bridge toward the Darkwood. Gar, the stable master, follows him to ensure his safety. Corban insists on searching for Storm, who he believes is still in the forest. They venture deeper into the woods, and Corban calls for Storm, who soon appears, thin but alive. After reuniting with her, they hear distant sounds of battle. They follow the noise and discover a glade filled with dead bodies, mostly soldiers in gray cloaks, with some wearing red. The sight of the carnage leaves them stunned and uncertain of what happened. In Chapter 65, Veratus leads his warband of over 500 men through the Agula's mountains toward Hallstatt, where they will join the kings of Helveth and Isiltir to fight the Hunan giants. Upon arrival, they meet with King Braster of Helveth, Romar of Isiltir, and other leaders. Tensions rise due to Veratus' recent actions as a kingslayer, but the focus shifts to the looming threat of the Hunan, who are preparing for the God War. Alcyon reveals he can lead them to the Hunan's burial ground, Haldis, where they will have to confront the giants head-on. In Chapter 66, the group is ambushed by red-cloaked attackers. Cywin witnesses the guide's death, followed by chaos as warriors are struck by arrows. Tull, wounded, orders a retreat but is forced to fight to protect Queen Alona, Cywin, and Adana. With their horses down, the warriors defend the women, and Cywin kills one attacker with a knife. Tull makes a desperate plan, telling Ronan and Aed to lead the women into the forest while he and other warriors hold off the attackers. Cywin, Ronan, and the others flee into the trees, hearing Tull's final roar. In Chapter 67, Camlin watches in disbelief as Tull, wounded but fierce, charges through the battle, killing several of their enemies. Amid the chaos, Braith and another man shout urgently, realizing the women have escaped into the trees. Tull faces off with Scar, the new chief of the attackers, who evades Tull's challenge. Scar orders Braith to shoot Tull with arrows, weakening him. After a brief struggle, Scar kills Tull. Camlin, reflecting on Tull's bravery, watches the attackers retreat into the forest, leaving their fallen comrades behind. The women's escape marks a pivotal moment in the battle. In Chapter 68, Evnis watches as Queen Alona's party escapes into the forest. He then uses a glamour spell to disguise himself as a younger man and sneaks through Uthandun, killing a guard and Uthan, Narvan's heir, in his chambers. Afterward, Evnis transforms again into Marok's form and exits the keep unnoticed. He orders his son Von to inform Pendathrin that Queen Alona has been attacked and to prepare warriors for evacuation. Evnis plans to take care of a wounded rider, one of Alona's guards, and anticipates that Owain is about to strike. In Chapter 69, Corban searches a glade full of dead bodies, hoping to find Cywin, Queen Alona, and Adana. He and Gar determine that Alona and others may have fled or been captured. Pendathrin arrives with warriors and orders a split in their forces. Marok leads a group to search for Alona, while Pendathrin plans to return to Uthandun. Corban insists on joining the search for Cywin, offering Storm's tracking skills to speed the hunt. Despite some resistance, Marok agrees, and they follow Storm into the trees, with Gar trailing behind. In Chapter 70, Cywin, Ronan, and others flee through the Darkwood, pursued by enemies. The group slows to catch their breath, and Ronan urges Cywin to stay close in case of a fight. As they prepare to make a stand, they are surrounded by red-cloaked warriors, including Morkant and Braith. Cywin throws a knife, but Isid is killed, and Ronan is fatally wounded by Morkant. In her grief, Cywin attempts to attack Morkant, but is overpowered and knocked unconscious. The chapter ends with the warriors being bound by their captors. In Chapter 71, Camlin grows uneasy about Braith's true motivations, learning that Braith is working for Queen Rin, who plans to stir conflict between Brennan and Owain to seize land. Camlin refuses to harm the women, particularly Cywin, despite Braith's assurances. As the group prepares to move, Camlin quietly gives the captives water, and tensions rise when Morkant orders him to stop. When Morkant threatens to kill Cywin, Camlin steps in, blocking the attack. He stands firm against Morkant, showing growing resistance to the group's leadership and his role in their plans. In Chapter 72, Corban and his group pursue their quarry through the forest. They discover a group of slain bodies, including Ronan, and find a throwing knife belonging to Cywin. Following the trail east, they track their enemies to a camp where Cywin, Alona, and Adana are held captive. After a fierce battle, Corban, Gar, and Storm fight off the red-cloaked warriors, while Marok's men defeat more bandits. Corban frees the women, and they escape into the forest just as enemies return to the camp. Marok orders a retreat, and they flee into the shadows. In Chapter 73, Corban trains with Halion in preparation for his warrior trial, discussing his readiness. Halion, impressed by Corban's growth, requests that his long night be brought forward, which Brennan approves. The next day, Brennan arrives with news. Halion is named his first sword and champion, an honor marking his loyalty and bravery. Brennan reveals a severed head from Ovin, signaling war against Queen Rin. The warriors are called to arms, and as they prepare for battle, Corban sees a strange ship approaching, bearing a banner with a white eagle on a black field. In Chapter 74, Castell and Makeen continue their journey through the dense forest, nearing Haldis, the burial site of the Hunan giants. Despite the constant dangers, including skirmishes with the Hunan and giant ambushes, Alcyon's leadership has been invaluable. Castell reflects on a tense meeting with his uncle Romar, who asks him to return and spy for him, fearing the shifting power dynamics in Tenebril after the murder of Aquilus. Castell is conflicted, especially after Romar's cryptic comments about his father. Varatus warns Castell and Makeen to be cautious, revealing Romar is making an enemy of Nether, urging them to find a new lord. In Chapter 75, Cywin watches a new ship arrive and is distracted from her duties. She learns that Corban is to take his warrior trial the next day. As they gather in the courtyard, Cywin is drawn to two warriors, including Nethair, king of Tenebril, who arrives with news of his father's death. Nethair offers his help against border outlaws, but is informed by King Brennan that the brigands have already been dealt with. Nethair seeks information on giants and the mysterious disappearance of his father's advisor, Michael. Meanwhile, Cywin reflects on Michael's visit and its possible connection to Ban. In Chapter 76, Corban has an emotional conversation with his father Thanon before heading to the stables. There he finds Gar sharpening a blade and overhears a tense conversation between Gar and his mother Gwyneth. Gar insists that they must leave Dun Correg immediately because a man named Sumer, a Jahar, is with Nethair, and his presence signals danger. Gwyneth is reluctant, but Gar insists on leaving soon with plans to head for Drasil. Corban overhears the entire exchange, realizing that something dangerous is brewing and that he must prepare for what lies ahead. In Chapter 77, Varatus joins the Alliance's forces as they prepare for battle. Their plan is to protect Alcyon and Kalidas from elemental attacks and assist in the larger conflict. Upon reaching Haldus, the warriors are met with a deadly mist that causes many to sink into the ground. As Alcyon and Kalidas battle the mist, Varatus and his men fight off a worm, saving Alcyon and Kalidas. However, the threat of the Hunan's giants remains, and Varatus leads a shield wall through the battlefield to the Black Gateway. They clear the area, and Romar enters the gateway, leaving Varatus to guard it. In Chapter 78, Corban prepares for his warrior trial in the Rowan Field, where Halion gifts him a spear. After practicing, Corban faces a tense encounter with Halion's brother Connell, who rejects Halion's help and announces his departure. Corban proceeds with the trial, impressing the gathered crowds with his spear and sword skills, culminating in a successful mounted spear throw. Halion presents him with a sword, and Corban pledges his loyalty to king and kin. Afterward, he reflects on his role and the upcoming war. As dawn breaks, a messenger arrives with news of Badon's fall, and Corban prepares for battle. In Chapter 79, Corban rides to Brina's cottage, warning her of Owain's advancing war host. After convincing her to leave, they ride toward Dun Correg, where they find the village being overrun. Corban and his group seek refuge in the fortress, where they are joined by King Brennan and his warriors. Outside, Owain confronts Brennan, accusing him of murdering his son and demanding his surrender. Brennan refuses, stating the fortress walls are impenetrable. Owain threatens starvation and death, then sends a gruesome message by tossing Gethin's severed head at the gates, signaling his determination. In Chapter 80, Cywin deals with the frustration of seeing everyone prepare for war, including her brother Ban, while she is left behind. Brennan inquires about the number of warrior horses in the stables, and Cywin shares that there are fewer than 200. Tension mounts as Dalgar's warband arrives, hoping to relieve the siege. Cywin helps saddle horses for battle before witnessing a chaotic battle at Stonegate, where Pendathran's forces clash with Owain's warriors. Despite Pendathran's leadership, his forces are pushed back, and Dalgar's warband is routed. The chapter ends with Pendathran carrying Dalgar's body back across the bridge. In Chapter 81, Corban and Dath discuss the challenges ahead, particularly the siege by Owain. Dath mentions strange noises from a ship belonging to King Nethair, which Corban dismisses, though Dath insists it could help their cause. In the feast hall, Rafe challenges Corban to a duel over the presence of Storm, Corban's Wolven. Despite King Brennan's disinterest, Corban accepts. During the duel, Corban quickly disarms Rafe and wins with a cut to his neck marking first blood. Afterward, Corban's anger flares when Brennan dismisses the importance of Storm's role in saving his daughter, leaving Corban frustrated and disillusioned. In Chapter 82, Castell and Macken race through a dark tunnel following Romar's honor guard. They encounter a massive worm, whose attack is followed by an onslaught of giants pouring from side tunnels. A fierce battle ensues, with Castell and Macken fighting off several giants. Castell is momentarily dazed by a blow to the head, but survives, aided by Vandal's timely intervention. As the battle dies down, the Jahar, skilled warriors with curved swords, appear and swiftly decimate the remaining enemies. Romar orders a door to be opened, signaling the end of the battle, with the group ready to move forward. In Chapter 83, Evnus struggles with his anger and the empty feeling left by Gethin's death. He watches Corban, aware of Nethair's interest in the boy. Evnus reflects on his loyalty to Asroth and his role in serving Nethair. having informed him about Michael's meeting with Brennan. The voice in his head urges him to act. After drugging Brennan's mead, Evnus leaves the feast hall, his thoughts lingering on a conflict with his son Vaughn over a fisher girl. At his hold, he manipulates Connell's jealousy to secure his loyalty. With a group of black-clad warriors, Evnus prepares for action at Stonegate. In Chapter 84, Siwen, feeling isolated, stands on the battlements of Stonegate, reflecting on her past and frustrations. She notices Evnus and his warriors arriving, followed by a hidden group of black-clad warriors who quickly attack the guards by the fire. Chaos erupts as Evnus plunges a knife into a man and the courtyard becomes a battleground. Siwen, armed with throwing knives, helps fend off the attackers. When Owen's host is seen approaching, the gate is breached and the enemy pours through. In the chaos, Siwen fights Connell, ultimately falling with him over the wall into the melee below. In Chapter 85, Camlin reflects on his unexpected journey from prisoner to warrior, noting the camaraderie with his companions. The mood in the hall shifts when Evnus bursts in, announcing that Stonegate is breached. Brennan is disoriented, and Evnus reveals that Owain has somehow opened the gates. Tension escalates as Marek storms in, accusing Evnus of betrayal. The hall erupts into chaos, swords are drawn, and Camlin quietly prepares his bow, sensing the danger. Nathair's guards position themselves around Brennan, and Camlin readies an arrow, unsure of the unfolding threat. In Chapter 86, Nathair accuses Brennan of betrayal, leading to a fierce battle in the hall. Corban fights to protect his father and others, while Gar faces Sumer in a deadly duel. Gar retreats, but is soon swept into the fighting crowd. The group decides to escape the hall through a secret tunnel, with Corban leading the way. They plan to find safety for Adana and Ban, though they are worried about Siwen's fate. As they move through the hall, Corban glimpses Nathair and Sumer dragging Brennan's body. Gar forces Corban to leave, and they escape the battle. In Chapter 87, Castell and his group navigate a dark, eerie cavern where they find rows of dead giants. At the end of the hall, they discover a giant's throne and a familiar axe, Romar's prized weapon. Tensions rise as Romar and Kalidus argue over the axe's rightful owner, leading to a violent confrontation. Alcyon kills Romar with the axe, and chaos erupts into battle. Castell fights to protect Makin, but is wounded. Amidst the melee, Castell faces his cousin Jael, who reveals his intent to claim the throne. Jael fatally wounds Castell, leaving him to fall, dying. In Chapter 88, Corban and his group escape the besieged fortress, moving through dark corridors toward a hidden tunnel. After a brief skirmish with Narvin soldiers, they reach a stone door that Corban opens, revealing a secret passage. The group is joined by Vaughn, who swears allegiance to them after his father's betrayal. As they journey through tunnels, they encounter a worm which Storm attacks, but the group ultimately defeats it. Reaching the cave's mouth, they row out to sea, avoiding Nathair's ship. Corban passes his father's warhammer to Farrell, and they discuss their uncertain future with Adana's safety at the forefront.